Welcome to Rauta, followers and new viewers. I'm Jerry, and this time we're gonna review a black metal book. Literally named as Black Metal Evolution of the Cult by none other but Dale Patterson, a famous, or should we say infamous, no really, famous journalist who have been writing about metal music, among other things, for many years. I don't even know the exact career amount of years and all he has been writing about it, but he's a very skilled individual, and I'll explain this book and background a little bit once we'll get to the initial introduction of sorts. Now, I guess some people have been waiting for this particular review for a while because I posted on my Instagram and whatnot about it, and there's a reason why I have been posting about it before making the actual review, which is not so common with CDs and all. First of all, this book is a tome. This is a massive one with more than 410 pages in A4 size. As you can figure it out already, this one is a massive reading piece of work, which doesn't just, quickly get browsed through and all that stuff. And because I might be a little bit weird, you can call me autistic if you want to, I don't care. I, of course, had to finish this book from the very first page to the very last page before making this review, and as such, it took time. And a reason to this is that, first of all, I hate working with deadlines when it's about my hobby, like Rauta channel here. Reading, playing video games or watching movies against a deadline sucks if you don't get paid for it. So I decided to take my own time, and I took my own time, meaning that where some people probably managed to read this within a couple of weeks or month or so. For example, I got it like a month before actually the release date. I took like 3 months or so because I wasn't reading this every day, and I hate reading big chapters. I'm kind of a way too hyperactive for all that stuff. So people who are like, okay, you're late to the party with your review, I simply don't care. I took my own time, and it was more rewarding than if I was forced to read it in a way like a project at work and all that stuff. Now, this isn't so much an apology, but just way to describe why it took so long, why it has been waiting for its turn, because I've been reading like page here and there and 5 pages here and there and all that stuff. But now I'm done with it actually this very morning, which is the 3rd of February 2024, and I'm going to show you a lot about this book. I'm going to go into details, I'm going to criticize it a little bit, but first and foremost, I'm going to explain why you should be reading this particular book. But first, let's take a quick look at the Cult Never Dies website. This is worth explaining for a couple of reasons. First of all, this particular book, as it explained in this very book, was the reason the label or publication house Cult Never Dies actually, got born. The reason for founding the label or publication house, it's basically 2 different things at least, plus mail order and what have you. It was born because of this book. Dale Patterson, working for a lot of years as a metal journalist before venturing this own project, own house, own company, did a lot of journalism for metal magazine or metal magazines, zines in general, fanzines as well included. And I want to show it to you because you have to understand the background for this book and this project, because it's not something that you just lightly embark on and within a couple of months you're just done with the book magically. This took years, and the reason is this. Now, mind you, on Cult Never Dies, you have a lot of books outside, like Rotting Christ, biography, you have a book about USBM, you have books about black metal in general, which this is related to. You have various other tomes, publications, collections of interviews and all, and this is related to all this because this new version, this restored, extended, and definite edition, is not exactly the first version, which was more than 10 years ago, and that's when Dale Patterson started working on this book. I mean, before, of course, he started working on it. This features a lot of archived material over the years or decades, basically. And when this first version of the book came out, that was a starting point for the whole project, which later on became its own publication house and later on, became a mail order and also releasing CDs. There are at least one CD, one band, Trivax from Far East places. That's something that I've reviewed from the very same label, so this is not exactly the only one I've gotten in contact with. Once upon a time, unfortunately my memory doesn't serve me that well, I'm old as fuck, I actually bumped up into Dale and friends, but that was just a brief, contact back in the day, so we really are not, like good pals, like I'm doing a favor for a pal. But I guess we are closer to one another in many sense that I could figure out before reading this book. First of all, we both have a similar background in terms of doing metal journalism for many, many years. Now, the difference is he's a pro, I'm just a hobbyist. I mean, while I started my own metal journalism career, if you can call it that, because it's hobby, not my day job, basically never get paid. That's the part of the charm here. I mean, we both have been here for decades. I started around 2002, 2001, and of course I've been doing a lot of reviews, and I have had my own share in the black metal scene since the 90s because of my own bands. And this needs to be explained because that's also the reason why I'm doing this YouTube channel, which is why I totally resonate with books and writings from the past. I'm not saying I'm like the oldest dude in the house or the scene, because I'm not, obviously. I mean, when I was 18 years, things like arsons and murders took place in Norway. So when I am reading a book like this, I am going basically, and now I will tune out of the side because let's focus on the book. But explaining my background is an important and vital thing, because you need to understand that when I was like 18 and all these things happened in Norway early 90s, it was people roughly my age. Like, think about like this. Satyr or Isan from Emperor, they're the same age as me. So I was basically the same age, reading about guys roughly the same age, doing these things in Norway and of course other places in the world. So I got myself immersed into the world of black metal throughout people of my own age, doing music and all that stuff. Now I joined my own band in 1994, so it was a little later to the party compared to bands like Immortal or Burzum, etc., starting their own ones in like 1990 or so, 1991. The point here is, like, everybody has their different background when it comes to black metal. Some people started listening to it like 2000, some like 2010 or whatever. Every story is different, every story is as equally important because it's a unique thing. Now, Dale's and my own background might be a little bit different, but at the same time, it's very, very similar. Him being from UK, and of course the scene and population over there with metal and all is very different from Finland, which is like 10% of the population, but we have more black metal bands. So obviously, the scenes are vastly different. However, going to concerts, seeing bands and interviewing them, and in my case, more like reviewing them rather than interviewing them versus Dale's work. Of course, there are lots of similarities, overlappings and such. And why I'm explaining this is, from my perspective, reading somebody else to write a big, massive tome about it is highly interesting. I really couldn't figure out much more interesting stories when it comes to metal music than reading a book about black metal. I've been, investing so many hours of past 30 plus years. That is, playing bands, writing about them, and later on doing YouTube channel about metal music for the past few years. So yes, of course, this is something that I think it's mandatory reading for everybody who wants to go beyond music. Now, of course, there are lots of people who just want to listen to records, don't really care about the world beyond the actual songs and what have you. And that includes both streaming services as well as physical products. I'm not saying there is anything wrong with that, but what is really important for people who are interested, slightly even interested in this book, is that you have to understand that Dale is one of those people who understands that black metal is more than chords or melodies or whatever. I mean, it's more than music. And like he states in this very book, is that a lot of people, even journalists like pro ones, who are not part of the scene but, writing about it, don't really seem to grasp the idea what black metal has always been. It's beyond music, and it's beyond like monotone, monochromatic, ideological takes. Like when people say black metal is been like anti-religion, anti-Christianity in particular, and also, very misanthropic, somewhat nihilistic, destructive, negative music in the first place. Yes, those are true, but not everybody seems to understand it. And then people are saying, yeah, you're like a bunch of those snobs and elitists who are gatekeepers and all, but that's part of the thing. I mean, you really can't separate these things from one another. It's like blaming a tiger for its stripes and teeth and fangs, and like saying like I want my tiger without those stripes, without those fangs. Can it be like a vegan tiger? No, it fucking can't. Like, get the hell out of here. And that's a very important point, because when outsiders write about certain subculture like black metal, it could be punk, it could be death metal, it could be something else, but let's focus on black metal here. It's vital to understand that when somebody who truly understands what's going on and makes such a book, it becomes highly more interesting versus some websites like Metal Sucks writing about it, who are there to just, get those easy clicks, like clickbaiting material and all. And we know how irritating that it can be when some outsider comes to your territory, on your turf, trying to define what you are doing, what you're listening to, what you are operating around, and trying to tell you that this is how it is. It's cultural inappropriation for worse. I mean, let's be honest about it. You really can't go to other places and tell the natives like, this is how it's supposed to be. We, being more or less black metal natives, we get to decide how our turf looks like, how it's supposed to be. If somebody disagrees, being an outsider, we can just say like FOAD. That's a doctoral reference for people who don't figure it out. Now, after this lengthy introduction, I hope you're still bearing with me. Let's start talking about the books. The book, there are very many things I could start upon, but I'll start with the negative ones. Mind you, there is only like two. First of all, my copy is a little bit damaged good. I'm not talking about these marks that you get like reading and stashing your book in the box and all that stuff. I'm talking about the slight problem with, I guess we can call it gluing. Like, as you can see, my copy is a little bit damaged. This happened very, very early on when I was reading the book. And mind you, I don't treat my things, including books or movies or whatever, CDs, LP, whatever, in a bad way. I like to put them nicely in a box or on a table or whatever. But somehow these managed to, get loose. And I'm thinking this tome is heavy as hell. So I think the part of the deal here, when you open the book and you start, like hanging it maybe weirdly, sometimes things like this happen. Now, this is a minor thing and probably doesn't happen to most of you out there. So this is just my version of the copy, so don't get too scared if you get it. The another negative thing, which I will go deeper later on in this review, is that Dale is not exactly the most critical when it comes to talking about the albums here. And mind you, there are plenty. There are plenty discographies from various bands, and he's talking about them. And because of that, the thing here is he speaks like nicely. Like a lot of bands, a lot of albums here. And sometimes it feels like, God damn it, Dale, couldn't you like say like, these are the good albums, these are not so good, and these are the absolute crap. But maybe that goes beyond the scope. I mean, I come from an album review guy perspective, angle. And of course I'm bound to say like, these are the good ones, go with these, and these not so much. But when you were doing a book more about the history of black metal and the bands in general, of course you're not supposed to go overly critical about the albums. You're more like describing them, how the changes are, what the styles are, and all that stuff. So I think like let's not focus too much on that. Now, what you need to know is this book is all about black metal history. And this is very, very interesting. I'll try to show you. This is a heavy book, so it's kind of hard to show you while I'll tell you. Starts with obviously forward and all that stuff. But this kind of listing is very, very important. This is some of the contents here. And as you can see, it focuses on different areas. Like first, the godfathers of black metal, the very early bands, Venom, Merciful Fate, Bathory, etc. Then you have Brazilian underground, then black metal pioneers, Hellenic black metal, that is of Greece, Finnish black metal, early ones, Norwegian black metal takes quite a big of amount of reading. I mean, you understand why. And then you go more into underground black metal in Sweden, depressive black metal, politics in Poland, that is Polish black metal, paganic black metal, and so on. Now, there are a couple of pointers you might already figured out. Why there is Finnish black metal only with two bands, Beherit and Inbel Nazarene. That's a big question mark. Now, and then of course there are others. I'll explain them. This goes basically in chronological ways. So we start with the early years, then we go through the late 80s to early 90s and onward. And of course these are roughly boxed in a different base, because if you only went to chronological order, it would be a mess. So first it kind of tackles the very early years, the early bands, which is of course important to start with that. And then it goes more like sliced and diced into smaller boxes. But this is curious. Norway takes like about 100 pages of the whole book. That is one quarter. If you think about it, it's 400 pages. Whereas, for example, black metal in Sweden is roughly, what do you have? 20 pages. This is a little bit peculiar because a lot of bands, for example, Dark Funeral is left off, being one of the biggest one from Sweden. Yet there are bands like Marduk, Dissection, Winterland, and Vatain and Shining. And then Shining goes through the depressive black metal when it gets bands like Life Lover and Forgotten. So there are bands from various places overlapping a little bit here. But sometimes it feels like this is a little bit jumping into different places. Like underground black metal is a lot about the French black metal scene. And some of those interesting key parts, what you could say, cornerstone bands are mentioned here, but some of the parts are very quickly gone through. And then you come later on even back for more Norwegian acts, like for example this Pagans, Folk and Folklore chapter here is about Vikings. And then you have bands like Enslaved, Helheim and what have you. Or even Satiric and Oliver. So even if this Norwegian black metal here takes for more than 100 pages, it's all over the place, and one could say this book is roughly 1/3 about Norwegian black metal. Now we all know, of course, how much Norwegian black metal means, but it's still a little bit like too much all over the place. And as a Finn, I guess it could be said I'm biased when I say there's not enough Finnish bands, but I feel like there are lots of bands like Horna, Satanic Warmaster, Clandestine Blaze and the like that could have been Behexen, Baptism, what have you, listed as among the bands. But then again, this book is more like focusing on the bands that you made an early impact. Still, however, it makes me wonder why bands like Archcode and Barathrum from Finland, for instance, are not listed. Or Dark Funeral or Mörkgruning and the stuff from Sweden. So there are weird missing points like I don't know. Anyway, this book comes with a nice selection of old photos and what have you, which is of course there to give you a little bit like filling the gaps, give you a little bit of insight about I'm gonna quickly browse, give you a little bit of idea what was going on back in the days. Like you have some old flyers, old photos from photo sessions of any given band. You can go for album covers, and of course there are excerpts from excerpts from the interviews and all that stuff. You have kind of a cool, what do you call it, archive photos and whatever. And then there is of course a full chapter of photos, like in color, also black and white, in the middle of the book, like showcasing you something that isn't on the middle pages. So you have these big ass photos of various bands throughout the years, and these are very, very historic. In my opinion, definitely worth browsing through. There are a lot of top talks and mentions beyond the music, of course. There are politics, there are things like racism, because I mean, fundamentally, different places have their stories. There are parts about Satanism. There are, of course, talks about suicides, depression, drugs. Basically, pretty much the major corners, I'm not saying all of them, are included in one form or another. And because of the vast amount of bands you have here, it's kind of a given that there are lots of things going on. This is hard to, show you the way that I'm actually talking to you. I'm just giving you like an idea what's going on. So you have a lot of chapters with a lot of photos, a lot of interview parts and all that stuff going on. So whether you are a newcomer to black metal or somebody who has just like started listening black metal a couple of years ago, this book is a real deal. There's lots of stuff for us who are old enough to be listening black metal for decades. Like you're like, I know that story. I know that story as well. I know that anecdote. I'm reading this particular interview and all that stuff. But let's be honest about it. There are lots of zines I never went to or online interviews I never got to read it. And since there are parts of those, it's like, wow, hey, I didn't know that. On detail side, I would like to say this book is very, very fine one. You have beautiful thick covers, nice cover art. You have a lot of, nicely worded things here. It's easy to read. You don't have to be a native English speaking person. I am not. And you still get to read. What is one fine detail I really liked? You have this, I don't know what this is often called, thread, something like that, where you can just use as a bookmarker here. Like, okay, I'm in the middle of the chapter, I'm just gonna put it here, and wow. Now, these are of course not totally rarity, but getting rarer these days. And in a book like this, which is not a fucking, a novel, but more like a book for, where you can about search for information. These are sometimes very, very important. At least for me, it's like I don't have to use a postcard or whatever bookmark here. I have this one on its own, and it gives like an extra value. I like these kind of details. Call me a weird one. Overall, I find very, very little to criticize about this book, as you can already have figured out. Like my only complaints are really that I would have liked Dial to a little bit, being more critical about the music. Like I said previously, he could have, in my opinion, basically voiced his own opinion, like, okay, I like that album or that one or this band from where they started back in the days, but then it started to suck. Because, I mean, I am kind of bound to listen to people's opinions, and I want to know them. And I know that when I'm doing interviews, I'm not afraid to tell them, hey, like, this album wasn't as good as that, or that actually sucked. And sometimes it might be an eye-opening thing to the musician itself. Really like, wow, oh, okay. Like when I told Eric of Watain last year at Inferno when I was doing the interview, like about one of his albums, like that was like, you sucked at the most with that album, and that is not just my opinion, but in general, people have been like, okay, that was a disappointment. And he was like, really? But I mean, he wasn't offended. I mean, of course, when we're talking about black metal people, you are supposed to be able to challenge them with your own opinions and all that stuff. So maybe Mr. Patterson is a little bit too kind to people outside or inside the scene and all that stuff. But like I said, that's not like a real complaint. That's just more like an observation. Now, on top of that, I really like how he concludes the book. Like he's making comments about various black metal genres, especially going beyond the scope, like post-black metal, black gaze, or whatever. And he's clearly challenging some of the more outside journalist commentary about what black metal is or supposed to be and whatever. And I think that's interesting. It's just a little bit too short. But then again, we have to understand this book is already more than 411 pages. So you have to like put it in a stop at some point. Now, I know I'm going overly wordy here. This could be a 5-minute opinion, but I wanted to give you a whole deal. What I really think about the book, how it looks, how it feels, how it seems. And if I can get my recommendation here, if I can mention it like that, I feel like this is a 5-star product. Like I said, the only complaint apart from the criticism is that this glue has been, gone or whatever. I think I can fix it anyway. That's not really to complain about. So I am saying I enjoyed vastly my about 3 months time span reading the book and enjoying those anecdotes and quotes and what have you. It obviously became like more, evident to me that I totally don't agree with a lot of bands out there. And of course, one could say they could have been more toxic, more dangerous, more, I don't know, parts where you just go like outside the safe territory, so to speak. But of course, there are lots of bands who don't want to give out interviews. So there's maybe there's a reason why certain bands are not that much more than a brief mention over the pages. Because if bands are like, hey, I would like to interview you for this particular book and tell the audience about it, tell the readers about you and your ideas and music and all, and the bands are like, no, we're not gonna do it. Then of course it's like kind of a pointless to do it. I mean, there are bands which don't do interviews at all, or who go very briefly about what they're doing, and then it's just about the writer's own opinions to do that piece or not. So of course it's understandable, and like I said, you have to be very selective which bands you're gonna include, so that you don't have a 1,000 pages book here. But anyway, being said, this is the best work I've read about black metal. Not that I've read many, not that there are too many in the first place, but I think this kind of a book, which is in a very, very neutral way, but yet critical about some things and very, very perceptive and doing lots of observation about the very topic, I think it's very, very important that this kind of book was, released and done. Because it's not one of those scandalous works which is like, did you hear about the arson? Did you hear about the suicide? Did you hear about the murder? These guys are convicted criminal. I mean, forget all that tabloid bullshit. Focus on the real deal. Focus on the people behind the music. Focus on the music. Focus on the ideologies that run behind the people, what makes them tick. That's why I do interviews anyway. I want to learn about what makes them tick, because I already kind of have figured out what makes me tick, why I write certain lyrics, why I do certain riffs, why I do these videos and beyond that stuff. Now, if you're a true black metal head and you're not low on cash, go and buy this. This is not a paid advertised, as you can pretty much figure it out. It's just me being honest about this particular book. I vastly enjoyed it, and I guess so should you. Now, off you go, and should you have questions about the book, should you have questions about the author, let me know and I'll figure it out if I can answer you or direct you to the right place. Now, good luck if you manage to go through with this horribly long video, but I wanted to make it through. I wanted to explain the details, so maybe it was worth your time. If not, get your money back. Anyway, this is Jerry, this is Rauta, and off you go. See you soon with more videos coming your way. Bye bye.